Boom, hey internet. Daniel Avila, very talented designer that's worked for some of the top licensed companies out here in Los Angeles. I always talk about pushing art direction, so I wanted to get this man's take on building aesthetics and visuals for clothing brands. Let's get into that interview right now. Very excited about this, Daniel Avila. We've been trying to coordinate and I'm glad that we have this time. I know you as an amazing designer, but if a stranger asks, like, how do you introduce yourself? Like, what do you say that you do?
What I say that I do is pretty much graphic design. It's just raw graphic design. It's primarily in the apparel business. So I follow it up with graphic designer in the apparel business because that's probably like my strengths. And even though I can do a wide range of graphic design, a good chunk of it has just been doing clothing graphics, apparel graphics.
I caught a glimpse of your resume and then saw some of the places that you worked at in the past, which I know are like grinders. That's places where you got to earn your keep and you got to produce at a high level. And so tell us a little bit about your story.
I didn't go to school for one. So I'm self-taught. The two programs that I first learned was Photoshop and Illustrator. And then I want to say like I created a portfolio that was graphic t-shirt driven and I somehow landed a position. And this was in LA and it was like for a little, unknown company in LA downtown. So after the second day I worked there, I got fired. I got fired. Well, obviously because I didn't know what I was doing. I literally I faked it. And So when it came, the printer broke down. And when it was time, the designer said, hey, can you print this out for me? So the printer was broken and it was something so easy to fix that any graphic designer would have figured it out on Illustrator. It was like the setting. So I failed on that and then I got fired. And then I took that little bit of information that she gave or that I took as an experience. So I was able to say, hey, you know what? Technically, I've been hired. So I was able to put that on my resume and I finally got a job with 7 Jeans back in 2003, 2004. 7 Jeans was a very popular jean. So, they pumped out a lot of graphic t-shirts for Walmart, Target, high retail to specialty. So anyway, quickly I got a job there.
It's cool to see another designer that's made it just from the drive and the talent, right? I mean, the looks that you produce graphically are so, there's just some people that are kind of born to do it.
That led me into a cut and sew company, which was totally, hands-on, where I was literally working hand in hand with the owner, and his name is Kelly, and he started a brand called Scrapbook Originals. Now, this was based out of Orange County, and they sold a lot of stuff to Urban Outfitters. And then that's where I got my real education. And the reason why is because I had to learn everything on YouTube on myself and, hard knocks, just raw hard knocks.
Right. So at that company, you were probably doing everything, right? Were you doing the graphics and then you were getting an introduction into doing cut and sew?
Exactly. So I started doing the graphics and some guy needed to print out the film for separation and to screen print. So I had to learn that aspect of the business as well and then work with the screen printers and work with the sample sewers. And that was a school right there. That was a school for free. So I did that stuff as well. But my strengths are just pure graphics. So the owner kind of got me some help and he had hired other people around me to take care of stuff like that. Really quickly, the 2008 crash happened with the stock market and a lot of companies had to sell. Unfortunately, he was one of them. Mm-hmm. And he partnered with Jerry Lee. So Jerry Lee ended up, I'm sure you heard of Jerry Lee Apparel, Entertainment. They produce a lot of Walt Disney stuff. And so they bought his company and Jerry Lee hired me and him as individual employers. And then that's when I got my major jump into that major leap into a big time licensed apparel company.
And so that's a big leap, by the way. So for people who don't understand the license world, it's literally a universe in its own. And
it is.
You even get hired on the graphic level there. You're literally battling against some of the best designers out there, or you need to be, because they're just pumping out so much content in terms of graphics on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Right?
And the thing about license, if I was to talk to somebody that wants to get into doing licensed apparel artwork, it's one of those things where you got to kind of have knowledge of Star Wars, Disney, Marvel, He-Mans. You got to be like a nerd you
got to nerd out. You got to get some nerd core in you, right?
Yeah. And that's one thing that I grew up with He-Mans. I grew up playing with Star Wars. And so it worked in my favor. That's not something I wanted to get into. I didn't choose to get into licensing at all, but it just so happens that I know a lot about that stuff because it's just, I grew up you know, with all like the pop culture stuff.
Okay, so got your start in licensing there, and then tell me more about the progression these latter years.
Yeah, so, you know, like I've been doing the license stuff for about 10 years. And now that I finally like see how product development works and seeing how assets work and, you know, different licensees, they have their own style guides, and seeing how they develop this style guide and how they design appealing characters. Like, for instance, if you take Star Wars and you take the character Grogu, he was designed specifically for marketing, for sales. That's my theory behind it. Like, there was a thought process behind Grogu, whereas they said, we got to come up with a character that's going to be very marketable. It's going to be very sellable. And then after seeing how that works, you know, that made me think, hey, I could do my own little side project and I could do my own little characters and sell those. So right now I'm in the transition of forming my own company. And so After Hours Fun is this neon light that I have back here. It's my brand, my personal brand. And so I want to transition from working for a company and then eventually starting my own little side company.
This is amazing. We haven't talked about this. This is great. So for After Hours, what is your vision for the company?
So the reason why I started it was because I had a lot of people like requesting for me to do art for them. And they would always tell me, oh, do you sell prints? Do you do stickers? So there was a little bit of a demand for the artwork that I would do aside from my graphics. This is just like raw illustrations, not apparel graphics. This is hand drawn. That's how it formed. Is pretty much I wanted to brand it, and I didn't want it to be tied to my name. I didn't want it to just be Daniel Avila Art. I wanted to, after working in licensing and I saw how they're doing it, creating a brand name and then having a style guide, colorways, and the whole overall. That's how you start a brand, and that's how it's born.
Essentially, I mean, you're really building like a brand guide in your mind before you even think about your first product, which is very forward. I have to point that out because I can see what you're doing is you're laying down the freeway before you put a car on it, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm very big with backwards planning and like beginning with the end in mind.
Yeah, because see, the way I'm doing it is I'm going backwards to what you're saying. I'm actually learning and then going backwards and correcting what I should have done in the beginning. And the number one thing for that is your target audience. And if you don't know who they are and you don't know what they like, how are you going to know what to design for them? In the very beginning, when those fans or those customers were asking me for pinup drawings and they're asking me for artwork, it was right under my nose. That was my client the whole time that I should have been marketing towards. But when I first started off my After Hours Fun a year ago, I was designing stuff that was on trend, like the stuff that I was doing for work, but it doesn't necessarily work for my brand. Does that make sense? Like, so I was kind of following the trends of what we were doing at work and then trying to do it with my brand, but it didn't work. That's why it's a fun career, because I get my day job, which is a 9-to-5 working for a licensed apparel company. And then I got the after hours stuff that I do when I get off work, the fun stuff.
Yeah, I 100% relate with it. And even in some of my past situations, I was the dude, right? Like I was the creative director, and I know for a fact I'm making our like branding calls and decisions based on data for that company. So there's a vibe, right? So if my art director is like, hey, what do you want to do for this next season? And I was like, let's bring our trending concepts together. It's always tinged with via some of the things that we've already sold and the retail is expecting from us. So
that's
I think
what you just said right there. When you said the retail, it's at the end of the day, it's what retail wants. It's what the sales team wants.
Yeah, so the creativeness kind of becomes a small window where the challenge is, how do I not get bored to death with the little 20% window of creativity?
Yes.
And I think the vantage point that I understand, dude, you don't even have to tell me, but I want to bring it out for the channel. Like, you are the guy that puts the looks on with all of those filters. But I know in your mind, you're like, bro, if I could just rip on this, like, fam, if I could just go nuts, this is what I would do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when you work in license, you got to follow their rules, and they're very picky. Like, take Pikachu, for instance. He's a certain yellow. They will not let you mess with his tone.
100%. Another note, just for people that are watching this is great that we're getting into license, because the average person doesn't understand, like, the companies with the intellectual properties that your company's dealing with, that if you win the assignment to be able to work with that entity, they literally could have like 100 pages of rules. I mean, they're going to give you the files, right? They're like, don't change this. here's the color palette, it's set. Yeah, but I don't think people understand how really restricted it is. And then the window to be creative there is even smaller.
Yeah, unless you're a famous artist, and then they'll hire you as a collab artist, and then they'll have that specific artist do a style guide. But that's very rare. You don't see that too often. I mean, you'll see that with famous comic book artists like Scotty Young. He'll get a chance with Marvel and stuff like that, but Scott Campbell too. But it's very rare. You don't really see. Yeah,
I agree. So tell me about some of your favorite apparel work that you've done in the past.
Yeah, so a lot of the favorite stuff that I've done in the past is we use a lot of Marvel assets, and there was a Civil War movie that came out with Captain America and Iron Man, and so I wanted to make it different than what was shown, like where it's just a full high resolution graphic. And so I took those characters and I kind of subdued the artwork in Photoshop and made it look as if it was done like in a dark noir Batman style, even though it's two totally different license. But I wanted to give it a darker look for Hot Topic because the Hot Topic is more of a dark customer. And sure enough, it was a reseller and it worked for them. And I'm glad it did.
Tell me about some of your favorite works that you've done in the past, some projects that are some of your favorites or that come to mind.
Over at Urban Outfitters, they requested a NASA design. And so with NASA, I did an astronaut character, and this is not style guide. This is like I took an astronaut and I made him like infrared. So I had like infrared colors, and now that trend is so hot right now. Like a lot of streetwear companies are doing that whole infrared look. Until this day, Urban Outfitters still orders that.
Oh, that means it made tons of money.
Yeah. So it reordered and I ordered, and yeah.
Wow.
So that was one of them that I was happy about.
Depending on whatever project gets put on your table, do you have a process when you're approaching a project?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually a traditional illustrator before graphics. I like to let people know, like pen and paper, I can illustrate. That's just what I grew up doing. So my approach is I'll do like a quick thumbnail, see if it works. If it looks work, then I'll move it onto Illustrator or Photoshop and then vector it. And so I just use the thumbnail for composition. But that's the key though, is keeping it as organic as possible.
As you start creating an archive digitally, most of the people watching on my channel are like startup brands and art direction, right? Or guys, if I'm keeping it simple, like your graphic design is a huge topic. So what advice, you've worked with so many like multi-million-dollar brands and licenses, a whole universe. You've been successful. You've had director attached to your name with a lot of that stuff. What advice do you have for a brand that's trying to create some noise in the industry like today?
So the advice that I would give is know what you're going to get into as far as a brand. Like, do you want to follow trends or do you want to be your own brand? And that's like one of the biggest things, is because there's a ton of streetwear companies out there and they're all following the forecast, which is WGSN. And if it's WGSN saying, oh, nature is hot, everybody's going to be doing nature in an edgy, cool way. So do you want to be that person, or do you want to have your own totally off the radar, coming from the left field, doing some crazy? You got to know which one do you want to choose. Or maybe you have a specific style that you're known for. And if that's the case, go with that. I went through that failure where I didn't know. I thought like you needed to copy trends in order to be a relevant brand, but that's not the case.
Right. God, I have so much to say with that, but you're so right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to pick on Supreme, but Supreme's going to just put anything on the shirt and it's going to sell no matter what. That's them, because they've already established that label.
Yeah. Well, that's not picking on Supreme. What you're trying to say is if some young designer is like, oh, I can do that. It's like, okay, you can do that and put your own, whatever your unknown brand name is.
Yeah.
It's not going to sell the way Supreme is. Right? Like, because they're just at a certain level and they're in a certain place in the market. Another example, whereas a new company, you better learn to make some noise in a completely different way because you don't have the same assets, right?
Yes. Every different retail has a different look and you got to change it accordingly. So those were some of the fun things that I did. People who want to start up a brand, and sometimes I have to tell them like what's not going to work, because it's just my experience. I'm telling them, keep it as simple as possible and try to sell that first. And if you sell it, good job. You moved it to the next level. So then you get into like the full, I don't know, like cut and sew, details, embroidery, stuff like that. But I would say in the beginning, start your budget low with like $300 to $400. Get like a run of 25 shirts. And to be honest with you, a lot of this has to do with marketing, branding, and getting it in the right customer, because without that, it's not going to sell. You can create the dopest best looking graphic, that doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
Yep.
I'll show you right now something that's really simple. It's just words, right? For whatever reason, for my personal brand, this one sold a lot. And the reason why is because sometimes people just want something that's wearable, and it doesn't have to be complicated. I have clients asking me for this elaborate style artwork, and it has to be perfect. And yeah, really, it's about marketing and how you design it and who you're going to show it to. Because without those customers, it's not going to sell. It's just going to sit there.
100%. I think timing and placement.
Mm-hmm.
Luck is in there. That's so gold. It's so good to hear it from another person who's like a professional that takes down a salary doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because my channel knows. I call it proof of concept. People will say, how many do I start with?
Yeah.
And I'm like, who cares? Like, if you don't have the money, just start with whatever you can afford. Like, have one t-shirt and then find proof of concept, like sell one.
Yeah, because a lot of times people don't understand it. Retail business is different from your own business. Like, I guess to make that clear is working at these apparel companies, the whole retail business is so different from doing your own. Retail, they already have people walking into the stores and they have buyers who already know, they got other information that we don't have. So they're going to know what to place on their floor. But when you're on your own and you're trying to figure it out, you create a website. Yeah, but who's going to bring your traffic to your website? How's that going to work? I would worry more so about traffic, about your customer base, and about how many people are going to actually be interested in it, as opposed to worrying about, the whole graphics and the whole artwork and stuff like that. And so like I said, I would keep it very simple and find your niche market, and then start off small.
I think if you focus on forging your own identity, eventually, you're going to get proof of concept if it strikes an accord with people. And eventually, those buyers at that retail will seek you out if you have a strong identity, if you focus on what it is for you, just to extend your point of what you're.
And another thing too is when you're starting your own apparel brand, you got to ask yourself, where do you see your brand? In what stores do you see it? Do you see it in a nice store? And if you just want to stay low key, that's even better. It's when you have your own little group and you don't have to rely on sales and cutting down that third person. I like taking the third person out of that and doing it direct to consumer. I'm a big fan of direct to consumer.
Yeah, actually, I run into that a lot with clients as well too, because if it's not part of your plan, and then they start getting a little bit of success with direct to customer, they're used to having the entire margin. Yeah. Right now, I'm like, oh, if you're going to play the retail game, it's Keystone. So it's all cut in half. So now they're like, oh, I can't even breathe with that. You know what I mean? If I'm selling it to the shop for $14, like I'm barely making X amount. I'm like, yeah. So the idea is that you make it up in volume and then you get the exposure. Right. For retail. But like you're saying, it's a different mind state and it's a different business plan.
Yeah, it is. It's more to it than just being creative and creating there's more to it. There's a lot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's so competitive. It's crazy. How can people reach you, or is there a platform where people should check you out and check out more of your work as well?
I have a personal website and it's Avila24.com. Avila24.com, and that's my work website. And that's my main body of work that I've done for the companies in the past. And then if people are interested and they want to see my little side hustle, that's afterhoursfunla.com, or you can just type in After Hours Fun on Instagram.
Daniel, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your story. It's not going to be the last. We want to hear more about what happens with After Hours Fun and all of your future projects, and we appreciate you being on the channel.
Yeah, man, I appreciate what you're doing, and you're doing a good job. Thank you for inviting me.
Perfect.